does not, or in the other words, if one can be removed from the work without affecting the productivity, if one can remove from the work without affecting the productivity, if anyone can move from the work, there is not affect on the production adversely, is known as the disguised unemployment. Example of disguised unemployment is people working in the field of agriculture. Person doesn't contribute anything in the extra contribution anything in the production process. Anything. Or in the other words, if one can be removed. What the difference between green box subsidies and blue box subsidies? Green box subsidies are allowed without limits. They provided to comply with relevant criteria. They also include the environmental protection and regional development programs. The blue box is an environmental protection and regional development. The blue box is an exemption from the general rule that all subsidies linked to the production must be reduced or kept within the defined minimal levels. The blue box is an exemption from the general rule. All subsidies linked to production must be reduced. They also include environmental production protections and regional development programs. The blue box is an exemption from the general rule that all subsidies linked to the productions must be reduced or kept within the defined minimal levels. And green box, blue box. And the blue box is exemption from the general rule that all subsidies linked to production. Subsidies is blue box. Green box is subsidies are allowed without limits. Discuss the importance of World Trade Organizations. World Trade Organizations actually student and every World Trade Organization WTO. WTO officially came into existence on the last 1995, and before it was the GATT. Is a product of the Marquess Treaty signed on 15th April 1994. Marquess Treaty, and as one of the 76 democracies which signed the treaty and become its member on cultivations. The WTO intends to liberalize and supervise international trade. Intend to liberalize. It has provided a structure to conduct a negotiation and formalize trade and agreement. WTO, which officially came to existence. Marquess Treaty signed in 15 signed on. India is one of the 76 democracies which signed the treaty and became member on cultivations. Member on cultivation. Actually, member on cultivation. The WTO intends to liberalize and supervise international trade. Liberalize. If he is provided a structure of a conduct a negotiation and a formalized trade agreement. Negotiation and formalized trade agreements. It has not only affected India's international trade, but also its internal economy. Actually, it has not only affected Indians international trade could not affected, but also its internal economic also affected. The policy framed by the WTO, framed by WTO, actually this policy have both positive and negative impacts on Indian business. Negative impact. So the positive, what is the positive? It has happened due to the reduction in tariff. It has happened due to the reduction tariff and non-tariff barriers. Reduction of tariff and non-tariffs. Actually, now the America is now implementing the tariff on India, and other China and the other countries also. So it is depend upon the it is the tariff structure. So growth in service exports. Actually, growth in service exports for countries like India, the WTO established the general agreement on trade and service GATT, trade and service, and agriculture export, curbing on trade barriers and domestic subsidies. Agriculture exports, curbing of trade barriers and domestic subsidies elevated the cost of agricultural products. in the international market. The curbing trade barriers and domestic subsidies elevated, enhanced the cost of agricultural products in the international market, curbing the trade barriers. The WTO it facilitated the trade barrier and domestic subsidies elevated the cost of agricultural products. Enhance product in international market trade barrier. Textile and conclude dissolution of multi-fiber arrangement has largely benefited the textile sector at the quota limiting the trade and now eradicated. Actually, result of developing countries like India can have unhindered export of textile and clothing. Actually, largely benefited the textile sector as the quota limiting. For quota limiting, trade are now eradicated. Actually, India can export huge amount of textile and export of clothing. Foreign direct investment in accordance with the trade related investment measures which he laid down the rules that restrict the preference of domestic firms, thus allow foreign firms to operate more easily in the international market. Actually, mm, rules that restrict the preference of domestic firms. Domestic firms means in India firms and thus allow foreign firms to operate more easily. Or foreign direct investment means actually foreign firms to operate more easily in the international market by any countries. However, compelled the member nations which member are signed in the WTO to withdraw the restriction on the foreign investment. Actually, India and other countries who are signed in the WTO, they are withdraw the restrictions, thereby harmonizing the dominance of local and foreign firms. Therefore, having the dominance of local and foreign firm company in 2015-16. The net foreign direct investment in India was 63 billion US dollar, and it already hiked to 100% in some various field. Negative impact. Impact of WTO protection. Protection Protection of intellectual property rights has been one of the major concerns. As only process patent parents are granted to chemical drugs, and medicines. Thus, a company can legally manufacture once it has the respective product patent. The companies could sell good quality product at low price. Sell good quality. But according to the TRIP agreement, a product patent will also be granted, which will raise the price of the products. As a result, the product not within the reach of the poor people. Fortunately, most drugs manufactured in India are patent. Of patent. Agriculture. The TRIP agreement covers agriculture as well. Whether Indian agriculture will also be affected considerably. Agriculture. Since a large majority of the Indian population depends on agriculture for their livelihood. Since a largely majority of the Indian population depends on agriculture for their livelihood, have serious consequences. Since large majority of the Indian population depends on agriculture. Indian agriculture will also be affected considerably since a large majority of the Indian population depends on agriculture for their livelihood. So this development will be serious consequences. Pharmaceutical sector means under the Indian Patent Act 1970, patent are granted to chemical drugs and medicine chemical. Thus, a company can legally manufacture once it has the respective product patent. The company should sell good quality products of low prices. But according to the TRP agreement, a product patent will also be granted. Will arise will raise the prices of the product. TRP agreement and the Patent Act. So granted which will raise the price of product. As a result, the product in now not within the reach of the people. It is beyond the reach. Product is now not within the reach of the peoples. Fortunately, most drugs manufactured in India are off patent, so people will be less affected. less affected.